Hi, I'm Lora Murphy from Health Careers, and I'm going to introduce to you today my version of a quick fix for recreating classroom tests and homework for Blackboard. I know this is a tough time, we're kind of all being thrown into this, but it's a good learning experience. Before I actually get into some details, I want to share some facts with you that you need to think about. First of all, this is new to our students, and it's going to be new to us as well. So let's not try to develop the new technology course. We're just going to get by with what we're doing. So think about, you already are giving tests. You're already providing information to your students. It doesn't have to be new and innovative. Just keep going. So if you think about this, we need to think about question format. There's a multitude of options in Blackboard for very extreme types of formatting for tests. But think about what you're doing in the classroom. If you're using just simple paper tests, let's convert those paper tests in some fashion to Blackboard for your students. Let's not try to be innovative quite yet. The best formats to start working with as a new instructor in online would be matching, multiple choice, or short answer. They're the easiest to set up. They're going to be easiest for you to manage and easier for your students to manage. Try to do the same thing that you're doing with your class and your students with your classes now. Don't create some newfangled kind of test. Another thing to think about is you need to communicate with your students, and so discussing and sharing things is a valuable tool. That's not testing, that's another session that we need to talk about. So we won't really talk discussion boards today in this session. Think about points earned. How do you now in your current class determine points on a test? We can work to that same mode when we do online tests. So we have to think about that. There's a lot of planning in advance. So what mode is my test going to be in? Keep it like it was, if you can. How many points? Am I going to give students partial points? Am I going to give them full points? And in most cases, you're going to be grading. Blackboard is not going to grade everything for you. There are some modes that do that, but you're still going to have things to grade. A big question that comes about when we start talking about teaching online is integrity. Integrity is every place. It's in the classroom, it's online, but integrity online is really even greater. How do we keep our students from opening the textbook? How important is that to you? The fact that they're opening the textbook and they're getting the right answers, are they still learning through doing that? I'm not condoning that, but it's just something to think about. So we have to think in terms of maybe limits on a test. Do you have time tests in the classroom now, or do you let them just work until they're done? Think about that when you're going to go to online. Test limits are good. They build integrity. My feeling with my students is we either know it or you don't, and looking at that question for 10 minutes is not going to make the answer pop out to you. So think about it. So we have time limits. How are we going to let them access the test? Are we going to put the students out there and let them take any test whenever they want? Probably not. So you have to kind of think behind the scenes. When do I want the test to be available? How am I going to let them know it's available? Do I want it to turn off at a certain time? If you are creating your own tests, think about randomization. Think in terms of everyone would be in randomization, every student would have potentially a different test. Maybe the same test, they're not in the same orders. Questions aren't in the same order. The ideal test has more questions than what each student's going to have, and I'm going to show you how you can go from that area too. The side we always hope we don't have to run into are resets and exceptions, and there are a lot of technical issues that might come about. Number one, who knows what's going to happen with Blackboard if everybody's taking a test at one time, and not just us, but across the country. So what if it shuts down? They're hopefully going to contact you. What if you have a student from Access Services that in the live classroom brought you that blue form that says, I need extra time? So you have to think about that, and there are ways in Blackboard to allow student A to have a little bit longer time than student B. It's all in the settings. Then grading and feedback. I think the most important thing with online study is prompt. To be prompt. Don't let them sit out there wondering, did I do it right? Constructive feedback and constant feedback. So we have options in our testing to go in there and make comments, learn how to comment to your students. You don't ever want to come across angry. You don't want big capital letters. You don't want exclamation points. And you probably don't want bright red. Let's not scare them to death. We have options also in grading and feedback. Some tests may be set up that they'll auto-grade, which is fantastic. If it's matching, obviously, auto-grade. On the other hand, there's a lot of things that are going to have to still be graded by you. So you don't have a paper test, but you still are going to go online and grade your test. So think about being timely, because these students are out there kind of in a panic mode. I'm sure they are, more so now than when they're traditional online students. One nice feature that I think is really great is standardized or automatic feedback. So this means as you're putting your test together, you can create some generic feedback that will go to the students when they finish. Refer them to the page they can go to get answers, to get responses. And again, we're gonna look at those options. But you can still add your own feedback. So the latter thing, which is actually another session, is then you got to think about the gradebook. How are your students going to go back and see how they did? As long as I've taught midterm online, I've often been amazed by the fact that it's about chapter 6 before all of a sudden I start getting emails saying, how do I go back and look at those tests? I guess I'm not doing as well, so help me. So that's another feature we want to look at. Part of it's going to be with grading. So we're going to take a minute. I want to show you some things and some resources. A lot of this is thought process, some very simple basics. There are resources also in Blackboard, so we will kind of go from there. Come up to the front and log yourself in. We'll get this going. Okay, I'm going to go to my Blackboard site, I believe. Just show you some facts. Okay. I have a site that's already been set up, and in other classes you're going to learn how to set up your course site. I'm coming from the perspective you've got your course site set up, it's basic. You may not have all of this. I've kind of put this into an older class of mine, but you have different ways to link to content areas. And all I have done there is created a content area where we're going to talk about tests. So I'm going to go in. I have gone in and actually created a folder called tests that I've opened up as that content area. There are a couple ways to build assessments. Assessments are your tests. If I go in and say, I want to pull a test that's already been created, that's what this list is, or I want to create a test. And in our case today, we really want to create a test. Okay, so I'm going to say create a test. I want to name it. This would be an area where I'm going to identify, these are my instructions, okay? This is how I'm describing this. Your students are used to you're getting up in front of the class and just handing out a piece of paper. So now it's like this replaces, hello, we're taking a test today, here's your piece of paper. In here, this is just like Word. Type in here just like you were typing a Word document, telling your students step by step what they need to do. Many of them have not been in online classes before, so it has to be very simple, even to the point of maybe click here, click there. So you're going to be telling your students what you need to know. Okay, further on down, we may have further instructions, we may not. So I've started from there. Now I'm ready to create a question. So what I'm working at right now is I'm in my test directly in Blackboard. This would be setting up, this would be the same as just taking out my piece of paper of the test I already have and literally converting it as it is, okay? I'm not talking about test pools. I'm just saying, here's what we're going to do. There are tons of options of forms of test. I'm encouraging you as a newbie and a one-week training person to say, true, false, we all understand that's easy. I'm not asking you to recreate your tests. I'm just saying, think of the kinds of tests you have. If you have already created true and false, if you've already created multiple choice or matching, fantastic. Those are going to be pretty easy to recreate. When we look at short answer, this is kind of my preferred simple it's like a fill in the blank, but it's much more efficient. So we're talking about create a question. I'm going to give you an example. Again, I teach medical terminology. We have spelling tests. That is not the best thing for online study, but there's no way around it. So in the spelling test, they're going to hear a word, and I'm going to ask them to write out the word and tell me what it means. So that would be a short answer. It's kind of fill in the blank, but short answer is going to make it easier for you, for your settings, and it's all going to be at one time. So I'm just going to go back with that here. Okay, so I'm going to create a short answer question, maybe. When we're doing this real quick, any place that there's an asterisk, you absolutely have to say something. You don't have to title the actual question. To me, that's a little redundant. But okay, so here this would be I'm going to call upon Stancy here. What's a real easy question for midterm? Build a word that means what? The study of disease. The study of disease? Okay, so here's my question. Study of disease. Here's my short answer. Build a word that means study of the disease. Okay, now I need to know what the answer, we need to have an answer. So this is where the student would typically put their answer, okay? When they see it, their own selves. Okay, so we're going to have an answer. Okay. So the answer to that is P-A-O-L, I can't type. I don't teach this class much. Okay, so basically I've created it. Okay. All right. So I have a test. I know there's a lot more to this, but I would be creating all my tests from my document. How many points do I want for this answer? I'm going to say I only want 2 points for this. So getting used to the formatting. I'm going to submit. So when I look up here right now, it shows that I have created a test that has one question for which the students get 2 points. Basically, that's what it is. This is a written test. Obviously, you're going to want more. But so you're going to go through your process with that paper test and put them in there. So you've got the question, you've got the answer. Okay? So rather than me going through a multitude of more questions, I'm just kind of showing it to you quick. So I call it my quick fix. We're going to be able to work in the classroom. I'm going to give you some other resources to kind of refresh your memory. Okay, so that was a great one. Now I want to do, let's do matching. Okay, so I want to build, okay. So again, I don't have to have a title, but match the best. Okay, so as I'm going down here, I'm saying, okay, I want to match the best answer, whatever your wording is. I'm keeping it pretty simple. Do I want to allow partial credit? That means if I have 5 matches, do you have to get them all right to get your points? Or am I going to allow you to get 3 points for the ones you got right and not the other? My first choice normally I think would be allow partial credit. So further down here it says how many questions do I want? I'm going to limit this. Well, it's not going to let me limit it any further. Okay, so I want 4 questions. Okay, so here's my question, first of all. I was trying to think of something that's not medically related, even though I'm just going to say, okay, this is very redundant. For the math people out there, please don't criticize. But okay, the sum of 2 plus 3. We are being very elementary here, okay? So my answer is 5. No, this is craziness right now, but it's okay. My second question is divide 4 by 1. Again, bear with me for this. I just want it to be as simple as I can. The correct answer is 4. Let's do 10 by 10 is what, guys? 100? Don't be afraid. Okay, and my last question is, multiply 0 times 10. Again, bear with me. We're just trying to kind of play with this. Okay, so there's my answers. That's the best answers, so they're going to get partial credit. Now I'm going to go down there and say, I want these answers to be random. And let's go back up here. I want to have, let's back up here. Okay. Add unmatched choices. I want 3 possible answers that are not there. Okay. I'm probably making you dizzy now, aren't I? Okay, so we need some answers that are not there. Let's see. So I believe no, we had 0 was an answer, 12 was not an answer. All right, so I've given them, so this means when they have a multiple choice question, it's going to give them some more options. Here's what your student's going to look at, okay? Again, math may not be the perfect example in what you're teaching, but to me it was like, okay, this is kind of easy. So when you put it in there randomly, the student's going to see the questions and they're going to see possible answers. My preference would be give them more than just the exact answers, because otherwise it suddenly becomes too simple, okay? So when the students are going to go in here, they're going to select the right answer, and when it's in the student mode, you'll be able to see that. So that kind of shows you in a very, very simple way, and you have many resources through Blackboard to show you, again, how to reset that. I just wanted you to kind of see what's out there. So you could recreate what you already have into multiple choice. Into matching. I'm all right. Okay, so we've seen that we could do something that's kind of like a fill in the blank. We've seen the matching. We can do multiple choice in the same fashion. So I'm still creating my test. Right now, I'm going to complete my test. I've added everything I need. Again, this is just a quick demo. I've created the test. Now I want to deploy it. So I'm picking the test that I just created. I'm now putting it, or what is often called deploying it, into my course site for my students. Name is test 1. This again says, what do I need to do? And there are some questions here. What do I want to do in regard, how do I want my students to be able to respond to this? So this is still behind the scenes. So we kind of want to think about this. Number 1, most important is, do I want it to be made available to my students? Well, if they're going to take the test, yes. But while you're deploying and getting things ready, this is your choice. But you are in total control. Do I want to make this available to my students right now, or do I want to go in and make it available at another time? Let's just kind of think about that. You have a lot of thought. You have a lot of questions for yourself as you get ready to prepare a test. Do I want my students to be able to keep doing this test over and over again until they get it right? Or is this a genuine test or assessment where it's like one time only and you get what you get, kind of like handing in your papers? So you could treat this as a homework. We treat this in our classes where they do it over and over again. We have lots of questions. They can keep practicing, practicing, practicing. So we let them do it over and over again. Score attempts using. What this means is if you're going to allow your students to take the test more than one time, as like with your homework, it's defaulted to say the last time they take it, that's the score that's going to go in their grade book. You do have other options. You can say, well, if I'm going to let my student take it more than once, I have some other options. And that would be maybe, I'm going to check multiple attempts. Okay, so if I say yes, they can take it multiple attempts, we can either say you can take it 199 times, but the very last time you take it, last time you log in is your score. Or keep taking it and I'll give you the highest score. Keep taking, I'll give you the lowest grade. I don't know why you do that. Just do the very first one. This is something to think about as you move into the next class session down the road that talks about your grade book. But you have to think these things out as you prepare your tests. Okay, so moving on down here. On the other hand, then we want to talk about forcing completion and setting the time. I like forced completion because my students have a time limit on their tests. And I'll use dictation as, in the classroom, we dictate 10 words. They have to spell and define, and it's over with. It's a 10-minute test in the classroom. It's a 10-minute class. It's a 10-minute activity online. The forcing completion means they can't go back to it. In other words, you start it, you finish it. It's done. Setting a timer says, how long am I going to allow that student to be in the test? I recommend clicking time and then automatic submit. This means that if time is up, the test will submit, whether they're done or not. It also means if they go in, they get started, they get distracted, they walk away, time runs out. Whatever they've done is going to save, and it's a good process for your students. Okay. These two modes, ignore them. We won't even talk about them because we now have such a better mode to work from that's going to be much more friendly. So we'll know when to display them, but not quite yet. Okay. Could do passwords. It's up to you. I password final exams because, again, in online, for my class, they've been online from the very beginning of time, and they are going to, they know that after they've completed so many assignments, I'm going to give them a password to take the final, but I don't want them in there till I've graded all their other grades. As far as regular everyday assignments, I don't think you want passwords. It's like a nightmare. Keep it as simple as you can, unless you're planning on sitting in front of your computer 24/7, waiting for your students to ask you questions. It's not going to happen. So keep it simple for you, keep it simple for them. I'm going to skip over this. This is kind of an exception. Right now, we're trying to have the good experiences first. Due dates. Due dates online, in my mind, are very, very important. Reason being is we're saying to the students, you kind of have your own time to work on this, but this is when you have to have it done by. So it's real important to say, click this off and say, this is the date and time. You absolutely have to be done with the test. That's a little bit of integrity side, but it also keeps them flowing, that they don't think that they can come in the last week of school and just get all caught up, because it doesn't work very well. I typically also check, do not allow students to start the test if the due date is passed. That's why we have due dates. So student just all of a sudden realizes, oh my gosh, I haven't been in Blackboard for 3 weeks, I better go catch up. You're controlling, they can't. I would not think that you would allow that in your classroom. So think about what your rules are in your classroom. I wouldn't reinvent a lot. Your students are in panic mode. You're kind of in panic mode. Don't try to do something different. Let's just try to keep them as close to what they're used to. If you start the day with a test before you introduce another chapter, well, then that's what they need to have, is that test, and then they can move on. It's just kind of think in terms of this is not like advanced online teacher training. This is quick fix. Let's get it done. Let's transfer everything over to online. Let's get through this semester, and then you can do far greater skills and learning on how to be that best online teacher that has everything prepared. We're just kind of making a real quick effort to get you out there for your students. So moving on. Include the test in the grade center. Well, that to me is like, well, I would hope so. We've gone this far. Let's get the grades in the grade book. So always do this. Never hide the results from the instructor and the grade book. You can never get it back. I know that from experience. It's terrible. Okay, down at the very bottom, your students need feedback. They're not going to, they're not going to call you and ask you how they did. They need to know how they did. So I encourage you to keep this after submission. The minute they're done with that test, I would click all these off so that they can immediately go back in. They can look at the questions again. They can look at the answers they provided. They can't fix them, but they can at least look what they've done. If you have multiple choice questions, true and false questions, the Blackboard will grade it immediately, and they'll know how they did. If you have sections to your test that you have to grade, okay, you have to grade it, but at least they can, look at it and say, oh my gosh, at least I got half of that. There are some extra features we can add to feedback to help our students know more about the correct answer. I would encourage for test presentation all at once. In theory, in what I've had from my training for online, there's a lot to be said about one question at a time. It's great, but it's very time consuming. These kids are already panicked in terms of time. Besides, they've never done this before. If they can have all their test questions at once and do not prohibit them from backing up, they're going to feel a little bit more at ease. Okay. We go to school, we're taught sometimes to take a test, go through the whole test, see what you know, answer those questions, and then go back to the tough questions. Well, online really doesn't take that approach. Our approach is go in there, do every question, follow through, bang, 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 you're done. Okay? Students are not used to that. So I learned through time that this might be the greatest theory in the world for online teaching, but in the real world, my students are just having a conniption because they were told in high school, take the test and answer the ones you know, and then go back. The problems with backing up in Blackboard is being run by a browser, and you got a lot of stuff across the top. That arrow that says back up doesn't say back up in my test. It says back up in my browser. Clicking that top button to back up takes me right out of my browser, which also takes me out of my test. So as a student, backing up, or in online, backing up means I'm scrolling up and down the side over here. And that's another real important factor. I would encourage you, when you set up your test, you have the option to go in and be your own student and take the test and see how it works. So, randomized questions. What is this about? In the perfect world of online, all of our tests would be created in a pool of more questions than the actual test you're going to give your student will have. That, again, helps with integrity. So if you're going to do, I'll keep it really simple. If you're going to do matching and you only give one set of matching questions to your students in the classroom, think about having more than one set, come on in a pool. That means that every student is not going to get the exact same question. You have a huge pool of questions. They're all very important, but you're letting the Blackboard randomize them. So this, again, is a bit of integrity. And I can give you one example in a minute of my students that sometimes you just go, really? If we're sitting all side by side in the classroom, we don't want our students to look at each other's papers. It's sometimes very obvious if student A is writing an answer and you're kind of peeking and you write down what they write down, that's not so bad if it's the same task question, but if it's not the same test question, that's kind of not a good thing to do. So this just builds integrity, is to randomize your questions. They're all good questions. Just keep them floating so that everyone's not getting the exact same test. Come on in. My first approach here is the quickest fix for you is take that piece of paper that you now hand to your students, turn it into a test. That's great. If you want to go a step further, we get into building a pool where you can randomize and you can do all kinds of things. So it's just something we're going to think about a little bit more when I work with you one-on-one. The other thing about randomized questions you might still want to do is it puts them in a different order in the test. So if the three in the front row here are taking my same test, and I put the same questions in there, they may, if you randomize, they're going to pop up in a different order. Does that matter or not? it does when you're sitting in the classroom. I think it matters a lot even online, because we may have study groups. We may have students working together. And as much as I love my students, they're very innovative. And sometimes I've said to my students, if you're going to cheat, could you learn to cheat smartly? Sometimes they do such obvious things. Probably shouldn't put that on film, but anyhow. So I have observed a situation where students are doing spell and define. They have got to be sitting next to each other because the words populate and they don't realize it. So one student is getting define radiology. The next student is saying define pathology. And student 2's answer is the answer to question 1 that student 1 got. And I'm kind of going, interesting. Is it possible? You know, I've had many excuses like, well, I don't know how that happened. I'm like, well, I don't know either, but I do. So I like randomization. We're telling the students not to congregate here at school. We're telling them to stay in small groups. But at the same time, I'm also saying to my students, study buddies are good. They probably have made friends, and they're going to want to get together and figure this online approach out. And we can't keep them from doing that, and I really encourage it. But when it comes to test time, the more we can do to distract them from being able to all share the answers, the better we can do. Does that kind of make sense? And I know you've kind of been coming in as you go, so it's kind of like, ooh, lots of questions. I want you to be able to visualize a test. I feel like the best way I can do that is actually to walk around and help with you. The point here, the videos for people that are out there that weren't able to come in today, and I totally understand that. The TLC staff has provided us with a fantastic resource. All I really am doing today, for the sake of the folks that aren't here in my classroom, is to say, here's something to think about. I think the most important thing is going back to screen 1. You got to think about it before you write it. It's kind of like when you're teaching a writing class. It comes down to you can't just go in there and write a report on the latest trend in coronavirus if you haven't read the statistics and you haven't done your research, okay? I can't create a test until I decide what format I'm going to put my questions in. And for this week and next week, keep it simple. I can't emphasize. You can't create a test until you know how many points you want this to be. So this, my quick fix, I think is the most important thing to take away initially from today. And then I'm going to continue to share with those people that are here live, one-on-one, but we also have a great resource that's been put out by the TLC. And it covers very similar to what I've had. Some goes into greater detail. That's okay. I've just tried to emphasize to you some very basics. So if you go into Blackboard, we have all this at our fingertips. If you go into Blackboard, there is a link. Blackboard training. Okay. If you go into your own Blackboard site, you should all have links that you can go to TLC training. Every handout that you're getting in the email, every place you're going, that link is hyperlinked. You can get right to it. But if you go to Blackboard, look for the Blackboard training site under Workshop Resources. We want to go into Blackboard training, and then you have all types of see and do demonstrations. So where we're at right now is the details of tests, surveys, and pools, okay? And we can open this up, and it's going to tell you everything that's in there. It's going to take you through step by step by step how to do all these things. So just kind of in review, I want to emphasize, again, I want to work with you one-on-one. That's the only way to really learn. But based on what I've shared with you, you have places to go to ask questions. Until you try it, it's like, oh, great, or oh my gosh, I should just retire tomorrow. Trust me, it's going to be okay, but just, I can't say enough. Keep it simple. So these are your resources. It's going to tell you how to build the multiple choice, the little things I demonstrated, I know it was very quick and dirty. But we're trying to also provide this as an option externally for people to kind of think about what they're going to do next. So the rest of my time here now is going to be, we're going to talk one-on-one. And we're going to create, or I'm going to help you create something, and I'm going to allow you to go in there as the student and see what you just did to your students, if that works. Is there any questions that you think might, I mean, I know we're not quite there. Any questions from what we talked about or things that kind of popped into your head before we leave the external audience? Yes?
I teach a business stats class, so a lot of what they enter are numbers.
Okay.
Are there any number rules or things like that? They can include commas, they can include dollars.
It's just like typing in a Word document.
Okay, so
They have a square box that really, to me, looks like Microsoft Office. They can highlight, they can da-da-da. You know, in their answers, they can do anything you want.
okay.
Yep.
So,
And you can do the same.
short answer?
That would be short answer. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of sophisticated ways to do that. I'm saying stick with short answer. Because less worries, just type it in there. I will, one quick little commercial for TLC. I don't think that those staff sleep anymore because I keep getting emails like at the strangest times. There is now the access also that if you already have a paper test, there's a program called Respondus. And Respondus can pretty much convert your tests into Blackboard. It's not foolproof, and it may take some editing. And I think it's a great program, but in the same token, it doesn't do all this behind the scenes stuff like when does it turn on. You know, it might get it in there, you may have to tweak it, but I would say take advantage of it. This is a great learning experience. I mean, there are so many wonderful things that you may not have thought about using in Blackboard for your students next semester when we're here live. We are going to be live eventually. It's a great learning tool. If we'd known this farther in advance, there's so many wonderful things we could be doing. But we're on, you know, like, get it done. And remember, everything you're learning, your students have got to learn. So talking meaning type. Step through every single step, regardless how simple and remote it is. Like, click here, click there. Do that. Because they're just opening up Blackboard going, now what do you want me to do? Keep in communication, allow let those students know how to get a hold of you. And I would introduce this as, this is new to me and you too. And we'll have flaws. And maybe there'll be something I can't answer, but I can get the answer and we're gonna fix it. Because there will be a problem, I can guarantee it. Something's gonna go wrong. My biggest concern is they wait to the last minute and they think about your deadline. Tradition has been deadlines are at midnight, the day of the test. I quit doing that because when it's midnight and my student's having a problem, I'm not sitting by my computer to resolve the problem. And by tomorrow morning, they are frustrated as can be. I've changed my deadlines to be at 10 o'clock at night because I want to be there for them. And if they have a problem, I tell them, you know, if you run into a problem before the test deadline, you get a hold of me. If you wait till after the test deadline, I'm really sorry, you weren't prepared. I'm really not that wicked, but you got to set some parameters or they will take advantage of you. Right, Stanzia? Yes. Stanzia is new to online. She loves her students, but you just don't know what they're going to ask, what their crisis is going to be. Plus, now we're going to have people that are going to be sick, their kids are going to be sick. Think also about what are my rules going to be. We got to get them through this. So, what else? Okay. I'm going to have to leave my presentation because now we're doing hands-on. You got lots of resources that you can go to, and now we're going to get to do some real practice. Yay. Thank you.